All right, I want to welcome everyone here tonight for our Torah study. And before we begin, let's begin with our blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commands and commands us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. All right, I want to welcome everyone. We've got quite a few new people here tonight, and just join in the conversation. If you have any questions or anything, just let me know, and we will entertain the questions and just have a great discussion. All right, now as we begin tonight, we're going to be looking at chapter 12 in Revelation. And actually, the next two lessons, this week and next week, we will be talking chapter 12 and 13. And there are six personalities, I guess you would call them, that John introduces to us in these two chapters. And so we're going to be looking at those. We've already, and I think everybody can see. If you can't see, pull up the chat part, and then that way a lot of these things will make a little bit more sense to you, because I'm going to read these, and you miss out a lot if you don't read Michael's comments. He said, you wrote to me earlier that I view chapter 11 as the end of the eschatological timeline. All that follows in chapters 12 and then through 22 are addenda and parenthetical information. Many scholars try to make Revelation a sequential narrative, whereas I believe many of the events are concurrent. What do you mean by addenda and parenthetical information? All right, we'll be talking about that tonight, Michael. I'm glad you asked. All right, might as well do that right now. What he's talking about, Michael and I get into some really interesting conversations during the week, and so he writes emails to me and tells me I'm all wet on certain things, and I write back to him and said, yeah, maybe you're right. So what I'm talking about here is chapter 11 is really from 1 to 11 is pretty much the end. It explains the full timeline of Revelation. Then starting in chapter 12, we take a back step and we start looking at, I would just call it, say, an addendum to chapters 1 through 11. And it's also just additional information. One of the commentaries that I was reading calls it the instant replays of certain things, so that when we see for instance, the trumpets blowing 5, 6, and 7, when those are blowing, that certain things happen, and then it talks about the two witnesses who have the power to speak things, and certain things would happen, earthquakes and fires and rain and wind and all sorts of things. Well, those are the things that can also during the seven or some of these trumpets blowing. So what I'm saying there is that when we look at these events from chapters 12 through 22, then we can say that those are they are within the timeline that has already been outlined in chapters 1 through 11. Chapter 11 ends the timeline, but then we just jump back in chapters 12 through 22, and fill in a lot of the blanks, or put a little bit of flesh on the bones when it's talking about certain aspects of the judgments and so forth. So that's what I mean by addenda. They're just adding things to, and then parenthetical things, where it says it may say something. This would be coming in and explaining it better. And so that's what I mean by addenda and parenthetical information. Just additional information, maybe an instant replay. Whereas, all of these things, a lot of the things that are happening in 1 through 11 are they're not totally sequential. They happen. Some of the trumpet blowing and the seals and that start happening. Well, you don't get the first seal and then it ends, and then you get the second seal and it ends, and the third seal and it ends. No, it's these things are poured out. These judgments are poured out. We do know that one, I think the fifth trumpet, we're talking about the locust coming out with the fiery stingers, kind of like a scorpion. And that one has an end point, because it says that only for 5 months can they do that. So there are certain time limits on some of the judgments. So I hope that explained it okay. Anybody got any questions on that so far? Okay, I got you all unmuted now if anybody wanted to jump in there.
That helped.
Okay, that helped. Good. All right, because I particularly enjoy sparring with Michael. We have a good time during the week talking about Revelation, and then when we get together, it's always thought-provoking when we compare notes on certain parts of the Bible. It's a lot of fun. Okay, so let's go ahead. Now, what happens is, let me go ahead and jump into this. We got chapters 12 and 13, and they're going to reveal 6 personalities. Now, tonight, we're going to talk about 4 of the 6. The woman clothed with the sun, the red dragon, a male child, Michael the Archangel. That'll be all tonight. We will introduce those. And then in chapter 13, we will look at the beast from the sea and the beast from the earth. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and jump into chapter 12, verses 1 through 2. And I'm reading these because a lot of people don't, or there's some people here that are on telephones and they don't maybe have this in front of them. Okay. It says, a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She is pregnant, crying out in birth pains, in agony to give birth. All right. Now, who is the woman? All right. Now, if any of you have been watching Rabbi Internet or Pastor Google lately, you will have seen that there's a lot of people predicting the end of the world this coming Saturday. All right, because they said, the planets are lining up in a certain way in the constellation Virgo, and then there's stars that are lining up that are the 12 crowns, and so on and so forth. So anyway, just to let you know what I think about that, that the world is going to end on Saturday. We will have class on Sunday. All right. And so the alignment of the celestial entities may very well point to something important. And I'm not belittling the idea that signs in the heavens and so forth, but
it could mean something.
It could mean something. We just don't know right at this point. I don't believe it's the end of the world. There's too many things. A lot of people who are pre-tribulation rapture persons, that they believe that, they were saying, well, this could be the rapture of the church on Saturday. Well, no. Well, first of all, just to let you know, the new people that are here, okay, I am not a pre-tribulation rapture kind of guy. I don't believe that it's biblical, and I just don't go along with that theology. And so there's certain things that have to happen in sequence, and one of them is I've explained it recently, that we have to have a temple in place, functioning as a temple. And, for all this tribulation stuff to go on, there has to be a peace treaty with Israel for a 7-year peace treaty, and it's going to be broken 3.5 years into it, and that's going to be the abomination of desolation and so forth. Well, none of that stuff is in place yet. We don't have a temple that's operating, and so anyway, let's go on with that. Now, like I said, things, stars and things up in the sky, they can mean certain things. Remember that 2,000 years ago there was a star that was leading a group of wise men from the east all the way into Bethlehem, and so that was important. And a lot has been made up of the blood moons. There was with Mark Biltz and John Hagee talking about the blood moons, and they pointed out certain things that Jonathan Cahn did also of events that occurred near or about the blood moons. But they were predicting some cataclysmic thing this last time around with the blood moons, and here we are after the blood moons, and nothing happened. And no, Alan, I don't believe that Planet X is going to smash into us anytime soon. I don't even know what Planet X is. I read some of that stuff, but no, I don't get real excited about that. I look in the Bible to see what the Bible says, and I'm going to point some of this out in just a minute. So if you look at what John wrote, though, he said that there was a great sign in heaven. And all through the previous chapter, 11 chapters, we see that the venue of John's visions changed. He would see something on earth, and then he would see something in heaven, and then it'd be back to earth, and then back up to heaven, the throne room of God, as it were. And so these things, they changed, and so it was pretty clear when you would see certain things that, okay, that's up in heaven. He's given a glimpse of something in heaven, the throne room of God, the altar where the saints are underneath the altar, that sort of thing. So, and what does John say here? He says a great sign appeared in heaven. It didn't say that a great sign appeared in the heavens, in the cosmos, that would indicate, a constellation or something. So that's kind of why I look at this idea of the Revelation 12 sign that's supposed to all come together on the 23rd of September as being something cataclysmic. It may mean something, but I'm not sure that it really coincides with Revelation 12. So I think this vision that he saw of the woman clothed with the sun and the moon at her feet, that could be a vision, an actual vision that he was seeing, similar to when he saw the 4 beasts, and they saw things in heaven. Kind of like Daniel also, he saw 4 beasts, and it was a vision. He didn't see stars lining themselves and so forth. So there are scholars that they have different ideas of what this woman meant, but what it signified. But I think let's look in the Bible. One of the best things that we've seen in the Bible as that I would like to point to is Genesis 37. Now you remember that Joseph was the favorite son of Jacob, or Israel, and Joseph had a dream in which his brothers bowed down to him. That's in Genesis 37, 5-8. Joseph was only 17 years of age at the time, and so he wasn't smart enough to figure out that, okay, if I tell this dream to everybody, that's going to make the whole family mad at me. So he should have kept it to himself, but he let it out, and so his brothers, who were all older, they kind of resented it. Okay, now what, Michael, better be careful how you drive to synagogue on Sabbath with all these Baptists abandoning their automobiles as they vanished into the ether. We've got lots of Baptists in Houston metropolitan area, including a sister of mine. We're Jews and we have to suffer the Great Tribulation before we can convert to the teachings of the Dallas Theological Seminary in order to have permission to walk through St. Peter's gates. Okay, Michael put all that in there with his tongue firmly implanted in his cheek, okay? So I don't want to disparage any Baptists in there. I've got lots of friends and relatives who do go along with the pre-tribulation rapture idea, and you know, I tell them, I said, well, if you're right, good, then that's great. If I'm right, then come see me and we'll talk about what kind of information you need to know. All right. So then Joseph had a second dream, and in his dream, his brothers and parents bowed down to him. And Genesis tells us what happened next. It's Genesis 37:9. It says, but then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers, saying, I have just dreamed another dream. He didn't get smart enough yet. Suddenly there was the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowing down to me. So when Joseph told his father and his brothers about the second dream, they scorned him even more. And yet Jacob, he just said, okay. And he put the dream in the back of his mind, and he just pondered, okay, what could this mean? Joseph's dream, of course, was fulfilled many years later in Egypt, when Pharaoh made Joseph his second in command. Joseph's brothers came to Egypt seeking food. They didn't recognize Joseph, of course, and they bowed down before him. And Genesis 43:26 through 28 talks about this. It says, when Joseph came home, they brought him the offering in their hand in the house, and they bowed down to the ground to him. Then he asked them if they were well, and said, is he well, your elderly father that you told me about? Is he alive? Your servant, our father, is well, they said. He's still alive. Then they knelt and bowed down. So here, the culmination of his dream, the fulfilled prophecy. So, considered in the light of Genesis, the woman who John sees would be Israel. Now, then John does a kind of a flashback to the Jewish patriarchs and the promise God gave them to be bearers of the Redeemer of mankind. So the sun represents Jacob, the moon represents Rachel, and the 12 stars represent the 12 children or tribes of Israel. Now, the woman crying out in pain symbolizes Israel suffering for centuries at the hands of the Gentiles while waiting for the birth of their deliverer, the Messiah, Yeshua of Nazareth. Now, this sign reminds us that God also gave a sign in the heavens recorded in the New Testament in the Brit Hadashah, when Messiah was born to Mary, a descendant of the tribe of Judah. So when Yeshua was born, the Jews were suffering greatly under the cruel rule of the Romans, and even Herod, who was not Jewish, he was a Hasmonean. God sent them a sign in the heavens, and then something remarkable did happen. That sign was the star of Bethlehem, which guided these wise men, these astronomers, astrologers, whatever they were wise men, and they came and they followed the sign all the way to Bethlehem, and they connected this star to the idea of the birth of a king of the Jews. And they possibly would have gotten this idea from Daniel, who they were several generations later, of course, but Daniel was there in the east, in Babylon, so they could have gotten it from there. And so when they asked Herod exactly where the king of the Jews would be born, he directed them to Bethlehem, because he knew the prophecy too. And so, out of fear, Herod killed all the baby boys 2 years and older. This kind of tells us that it took wise men a couple of years to get there, or maybe a year or something. But Herod, just to be on the unsafe side, decided that he was going to kill every baby boy in Jerusalem, in Bethlehem, from the age of 2 to 0, anything under the age of 2. So these are the circumstances in which Yeshua was born, in intense Jewish suffering. So the imagery of a pregnant woman about to give birth, that's seen in other places in the Bible. We can look at Isaiah 26, 17 and 18. It says that as a pregnant woman about to give birth rises and cries out in her pain, so we were before you, Adonai. We have been with child, we have been in pain, yet we gave birth to wind, nothing, gave birth to nothing. We were accomplishing no deliverance for the earth, nor are inhabitants of the world coming to life. So that was their idea, that they were being persecuted and like a woman in labor, but then at the end of the day, they accomplished nothing and they delivered nothing. Then in Isaiah 66, 7 through 8, before she, Israel, was in labor, she gave birth. Before her pain came, she delivered a male child. Who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such things? Can a land be born in one day? Can a nation be brought forth at once? For as soon as Zion was in labor, she gave birth to her children. And of course, this is, many believe, a prophecy of the modern state of Israel coming into being by a vote of the United Nations. So yes, indeed, the state of Israel was born in a single day. So, all right, I think that's so in John's vision, the woman about to give birth and in labor represented Israel's national spiritual pain before Yeshua's appearing at his first coming. All right. So before I go on, then let me unmute everybody. Okay. Revelation 3 and 4 said, and then another sign appeared in heaven, a great fiery red dragon that had 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 royal crowns on his head. His tail sweeps away a third of the stars of heaven. It hurled them to the earth. Now the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that whenever she gave birth, he might devour her child. All right. Now, here's a picture that I found of the dragon. It's obviously it's kind of a artistic license, and it's not even all that red. Actually, more kind of pinkish, or I don't know what color. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what kind of color that is. Anyway, but it's you can see 7 heads, and there's going to be 10 horns and 7 crowns, and it's a hideous beast that we don't even know what it really is. So the 7 heads, that would be, we go back into Daniel. Wanted to say that when we read that scripture, says it's another sign in heaven. Now, again, same kind of wording that he used, that it was a sign in heaven, not a sign in the heavens or in the heavenlies or something. So there doesn't seem to be a corresponding constellation that is competing with Virgo for the attention of today's internet surfers. So again, maybe we could surmise that the dragon was a vision that John saw in heaven, and not an alignment of stars in the constellations. So this dragon, it had 7 heads, 10 horns, 7 crowns, and in verse 9 we see that it calls him the devil or Satan. Now in in apocalyptic language, the 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns, they represent nations and the world leaders over which Satan will rule in the end times. Since the number 7 often means completion, the idea is that Satan will have complete power and authority over a world united under his control. Only God's people, and apparently some strong-willed independent holdouts who refuse the mark of the beast, do not submit to him. This is why Satan energizes his puppet world leaders, and they're going to be persecuting God's people. And then John expands on this in Revelation 13 and 17, where he tells us that the beast tells us about the beast from the sea and the beast from the earth. Now, this beast, if you were with us in the Daniel study, it corresponds to that beast in Daniel 7:7, and that is, I'll read that for you. It says, "After this, in my vision at night, I looked, and behold, there was a 4th beast, terrifying, frightening, tremendously strong, with large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed, and anything that was left it trampled with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that came before it. It had 10 horns." The second sign that John saw, then, it was the red dragon. God identified him in verses 9 and also in chapter 20 and verse 2 as Satan. Now, dragon, the Greek word is drakon. It occurs 12 times in the Brit Hadashah, or the New Testament, and only in the book of Revelation. It in every instant it refers to Satan. When you hear dragon, it says you can count on it. That means Satan. And a dragon symbolizes a powerful, aggressive, deadly foe. As red color perhaps means it symbolizes bloodshed. And the 7 heads, 10 horns, probably, I'll say probably, represent 7 nations and 10 rulers. 10 kings will at first rule under his authority, but then when the Antichrist rises up into power, into preeminence, he will subdue 3 of them, leaving only 7 rulers. Now, you remember that when we went through that in Daniel. That's in Daniel 7 through 8, and in Daniel 20 and 24. Okay. Daniel 7, 20, and 24. Revelation 13 and 1 is another instance we're talking about the dragon. Now, the 7 crowns, or in Greeks, it's diadema or diadema. They picture the political authority of these 7 rulers during the Great Tribulation. Now, there's actually, if you don't want to be so figurative, I guess, with this, there's a less literal interpretation, I guess, regards the horns as simply symbolic of the dragon's mighty strength. I don't know if it means that or not, but I did want to point out that when he's talking about, here's again, I think it's a picture of what John does in his writing when I say he's parenthetical. He will jump back in time, where he's talking about 1/3 of the stars fell from the heaven. I don't believe he's talking about the stars in the sky. I think what he's talking about is that this Satan, that when he was cast out of heaven in the great rebellion, where Satan rebelled against God, that he said that he took 1/3 of the angels with him. And so I think that's what John is referring back to. That would have been very familiar to his Jewish listeners, his Jewish audience of the book of Revelation. So let me go ahead and stop. Any comments or questions right here at this point? All right, then we will continue on. Revelation 12, 5 through 6. And she gave birth to a son, a male child who is to rule all the nations with an iron rod. And her child was snatched away to God and to his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, so they might take care of her for 1,260 days. Okay. Now, this one is kind of problematic for people. And one of them, well, the question came out, well, what about this iron rod, a male child who is to rule all the nations with an iron rod? Would that mean then that this son, that this male child was something other than Yeshua being born? I don't know. What do you think? Anybody got another idea as to who would rule the nations with an iron rod? Any ideas? Anybody want to jump out there and with a comment?
I'm not willing to risk.
Oh, I know you and I have already sparred on that one today, Michael. And so, oh my! Any ideas? Any thought on that? Is this idea of the iron rod? Psalms 2. Okay, what does that say, Kathy? Can you talk to us?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, wow. I tried calling on the phone. I can't be heard on the computer. Let me turn over there to Psalm 2 a minute.
Okay, and I can actually see if I can pull it up here quickly and put it up.
Yeah, I'm using a paper Bible on one knee here, so let's see.
Well, I hope you're driving at the same time.
Oh, let's see if I remember this right. You shall break them with a rod of iron. You shall dash them to pieces like a potter's vessel. I think it's understood that this refers to Jesus' role during the millennium.
Okay. All right. That's a good one. And also, I want to point out that in later on in Revelation, the point was, Michael had said, well, this doesn't sound too much like Yeshua, the Lamb of God, the kind and gentle shepherd and the Savior and so forth. But in Revelation, we later on we see this same phrase, and it's Revelation 19 and 15. It says, "From his mouth comes a sharp sword, so that with it he may strike down the nations, and he will rule them with an iron rod, and he treads the winepress of the furious wrath of Elohe Sabaoth." Okay, and from this, of course, we get the words of the that came out of the War of Northern Aggression back 150 years ago, with the what I'm talking about, the battle hymn of the Republic. He is trample out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. So anyway, I would think that in my mind, this is a pretty safe assumption that what we're talking about is Yeshua in his role as the ruler of the world during the millennial reign, even before the millennial reign is actually kicked into place. I think that there's going to be a lot of house cleaning happening in just the very last bit of the Great Tribulation, because I see that as the time where Yeshua comes to earth. It comes down, in the cloud. That's when I believe that all of the saints, dead and alive, will rise up, meet with him in the air, that all the bodies will be changed in the twinkling of an eye, and then come back accompanying Yeshua as he starts, the Battle of Armageddon, where they kill so many of Israel's enemies and the enemies of God. And then there will be, quite a period of cleanup and getting things ready to go for the millennial kingdom. And we'll get into all of that later on in Revelation. So, that way, go ahead and read up ahead and read to the back of the book so that you know what's going to happen. So, all right. Any other comments or questions right now before we continue on? All right. So here we go. Okay, Revelation 7, Revelation 12, 7 through 12. And war broke out in heaven, Michael and his angels making war against the dragon. The dragons and his angels fought, but they were not strong enough. And there was that's encouraging right there that they were not strong enough, and that they could not defeat God's forces. But they were not strong enough, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, the ancient serpent called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. And he was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his anointed one, for the accuser of our brothers and sisters, the one who accuses them before our God day and night, has been thrown out. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives even to the face of death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you with great rage, knowing that his time is short. All right. There's a lot of stuff in these verses here. And we could probably spend a week or so just talking about this verses. But let's look at Michael the Archangel. You remember in the book of Daniel, where we saw that Michael was fighting in behalf of Israel. They said that he was fighting against the prince of Persia. And so we see that Michael, he's the leader of God's angelic army, an archangel. He is especially, Israel's patron, I guess, patron angel, I guess you would say. He's the one that's assigned to actually look out after and protect Israel. We see that in Daniel 10, 13, and 21, and also in 12:1. And so he holds a very, very high position of authority. And he would be on the equivalent of the Satan being a fallen angel. Well, Michael the Archangel would be on a par with that. Michael McGuckin says that Yeshua ruling with an iron rod adds a new image to our Christological vocabulary. This is an aggressive face for our Lord and Savior who gave his life for our sins. The iron rod may indicate Yeshua will have to engage in war and defeat the nations which will oppose God's will for humanity. Absolutely, Michael. In my mind, there's no question that Yeshua, they talk about him when he comes back, that he's going to come back as a mighty warrior. That's when Israel will see Yeshua as Mashiach ben David. Remember that they were looking for that 2,000 years ago to break the spell or break the bondage of Rome. They were looking for the Messiah, the son of David, the warrior king, and yet what they got was Messiah, the son of Joseph, the suffering servant. They weren't prepared for that. And so, yeah, I think we can see that Yeshua is going to come back. And Alan says, Revelation 19:15 covers that with Yeshua leading the army of God. And I believe that we will also be in that host. That's one of the reasons that I really wanted to go to Megiddo and the valley of the valley of Megiddo, so that I went from one end of it to the other end of it, just reconnoitering, so that when I go back with Yeshua, I've already been there once. So, and this is all stuff that will be happening at and just after the second coming of the Messiah. That is correct. Okay, so Revelation 13:17. Now, when the dragon saw that he had been thrown to the earth, he stalked the woman who had given birth to the male child. Okay, I'm behind here. So I want to go ahead and point this out, that Satan and his angels were weaker than Michael. He loses. And here's a case again where I think that John is being parenthetical and just kind of filling in some blanks, because the idea that Satan he was cast out of heaven and so forth, but he still had access to the throne of God. Now, why do I say that? It was because we know in the story of Job, in the book of Job, where Satan came to God and accused Job of not being faithful. And so we see that, they call Satan, devil, the old accuser and the adversary. And so at this point, I think that John is seeing that Satan is cast out. He's lost access to heaven. No longer can he go to the throne of God. No longer can he accuse the saints. So he is losing his access and his authority. So, and at this point, then we see that heaven just erupts in praise again. This is not the first time that has happened. There's other times where everyone is praising God in heaven, and it would be quite the noise, I'm sure. So before we go on, I'll give you another chance here to comment or say anything. Questions? All right. Just write them down when you get to them then, or jump in. That's okay. Let's go ahead with the last verses here. Now, when the dragon saw that he had been thrown to the earth, he stalked the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings of the great eagle, so that she might fly away from the presence of the serpent into the wilderness, to the place where she is taken care of for a times and half a time. And from out of his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river from after the woman, in order to sweep her away with the flood. But the earth came to the aid of the woman. The earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had spewed from his mouth, so that the dragon became enraged at the woman, and went off to make war with the rest of her offspring, those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Yeshua. Wow, we got a lot of stuff in here that I wanted to bring up the idea. Okay, the dragon saw that he had been thrown to the earth. Okay, yeah, this again is not something I would believe that is a one-time event. Satan had seen that he was thrown down to the earth long ago. He stalked the woman, Israel, even before. Why did he do that? Well, because in Satan's mind, if he can destroy Israel even before the birth of especially before the birth of the Messiah. Then he breaks the chain, breaks the spell, as it were, and he defeats God, because then the Redeemer cannot be born if he can destroy Israel and certainly the tribe of Judah from which the Messiah would be coming. So that's why all through the years, Satan is doing everything he can to disrupt Israel, to destroy Israel, and even to this day, still trying to destroy Israel, because without an Israel, then the Messiah doesn't come back the second time. But it says, now the woman is given 2 wings of the great eagle. Now the question was asked of me this week, well, what do you mean by these 2 wings? I mean, that's, what, it just doesn't make any sense. Well, it's imagery. Remember that this is apocalyptic literature. This is not something that you can look at and empirically bring up information, because it is written in a figurative or an apocalyptic style that was common back in those days. And so the idea of the angel's wings, again, apocalyptic symbolism. So we see this when Israel left Egypt, and God said, he was talking to them, and you read this in Exodus 19:4. It says, "You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself." And then you find similar stuff like that in the Deuteronomy 32:11 and 12. So obviously, the question was asked of me this week, obviously these eagle's wings do not represent, I don't believe, they don't represent the United States and the U.S. protecting Israel. I think that it will be supernatural. I think it will be God. Because let's face it, folks, we won't have a pro-Israel president in the presidency in the United States forever. Eventually, you're going to get another anti-Semitic person who hates Israel and wants to do away with Israel, just like we just had. And the U.S. Israel cannot count on the United States. That's all there is to it. But they can count on the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that's what the Bible says here, that the woman was given 2 wings so that she might fly. And the idea of it here is, okay, how could this happen? God, where was he during all of the times of persecution, from the time the temple was destroyed, and then later on when the Romans came in and threw everybody, all the Jews out of Jerusalem, and then Constantine came along and outlawed all expressions of Judaism. And then all throughout history, our people have been suffering at the hands of those who would try to wipe us out. And you'd have pogroms, and you would obviously the Crusades came through. They killed people, Jewish people, all the way through Europe on their march to the Holy Land, and they would, it's just, history is full of it. Then we have the Holocaust and all these kinds of things. So how can we say now that God is going to take, what does this look like? That he's going to take them up on wings for a time, times, and half a time, meaning 3.5 years. Well, the only way that I could explain this is that these are extraordinary times, and extraordinary times requires an extraordinary rescue. So whatever this is and however it happens, it says that the serpent spewed water like a river after the woman in order to sweep her away in the flood. Again, I believe this is probably apocalyptic language. Is there a literal, they're going to try to drown them out? Well, maybe parts of it, because the Bible does speak of Israel taking shelter in Petra. And if you've ever been to Petra, you know they've got these mass. I mean, it's just a big canyon, and you can imagine if water went sweeping through this canyon, that you could not stand in that. Just about any kind of water going through those canyons there at Petra before it opens out into all of the things, the buildings that are carved into the face of the canyon. You couldn't stand against it. So I think this is symbolism that is it water, or is it an army, or whatever it is. It says that the earth came to the aid of the woman. Again, apocalyptic language where God provides a way that the earth swallows it up. Remember back at the when Korah rebelled against Moses, the earth swallowed them up, and then fire came in and destroyed them, so that the earth cleansed Israel from that evil of mutiny, that the mutinous leadership. And so again, the earth would open up and swallow this and protect God's people. So it said that the dragon became enraged at the woman, went off to make war with the rest of her offspring. Who are the rest of the offspring? Well, if Israel is the one, if the woman is Israel, then what's the rest of the offspring? Could that be Messianic Jews and Messianic Gentiles, believers in Yeshua? I believe that could be what they're talking about, that Satan is going to really, really go after, as if he's not right now, but I mean that step up the game against the people of Yeshua, the people that believe in Yeshua, those that are the Messianic Jews, and then the grafted in Messianic Gentiles, which in Yeshua, in God's eyes, are all one and the same. So we got a comment here from Michael. The Revelation 12 and 13 is not stuffed with random information. Revelation is written with great thought, and everything in the book belongs where it is found in the book. The two chapters form a splendid chiasm that crowns the great chiasm that gives Revelation its form and structure. In fact, this chiasm sits at the climax of the chiasm. Some scholars extend the chiasm to Revelation 15 and 5. The longer chiasm is Revelation 11 and 18, 19. This works as the crown of the great chiasm. And what Michael is talking about is chiasms, as we've explained in the past, is where you've got an idea at one point, and then later on in the book, you've got like say toward the end of the book. So at the beginning, say if there was in Revelation, if there's 22 chapters. Okay, you'd have an idea in chapter 1. Let's call it A prime. Chapter 22, you'll have A in chapter 1, you'll have A prime in chapter 22. Then you have another thought or an idea that relates to it maybe in chapter 3. We'll call that B. And then you go down to another chapter down at the bottom, say chapter 20, that is B prime. And so you keep extending down to where at the middle, then you'll have right in the middle, you'll have the central point of what the writer is trying to bring out. And that's what Michael is saying, is that the center of the chiasm the chiastic structure is right there in Revelation 11, 12, 13. And, I had said before that the timeline stops at 11, and then we start getting the additional information starting at 12. So right in that that divide between 11 and 12 would be the crown of the culmination of that chiastic structure. That's really getting into a lot of technical stuff that for tonight I'm not prepared to get into it too much. And I just wanted to go ahead and finish this off. I think I've gone ahead. I've talked about this already. Toward the end there, Satan is enraged because he cannot destroy Israel, and he turns his attention to Messianic Jews wherever we may be all over the world. And I say Messianic Jews, that's also the grafted in folks too. So you get to participate in all of the chicanery of Satan. Lucky you. All right, let me unmute everybody to see if there's any other comments or questions.